Welcome to episode 193 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We are recording on January 29th, 2023. My name is Jeff. I'm the voluntold host of the show tonight. Eric has some family issues he's dealing with. I'm based in Central Ontario. I'm a target shooter, ham radio operator, general overall handyman, and weather nerd.
And I'm Brad. I'm in Eastern Ontario. Consider myself a part-time amateur prepper, constantly trying to better myself.
Hey, I'm Mel, a second timer on this incredible podcast, and this time I brought a really good friend of mine with me. I absolutely adore anything nature and the secret she holds. Besides my green thumb, curious mind, and the love for nature, I am an avid hunter, hippie at heart, and someone that enjoys life's adventures with an open mind, the willingness to learn and share what I know.
And I am Corey. I'm just a humble horticulturalist here to basically spread the word of permaculture, self-sustainability. I like to focus more on the seed saving aspect and the old school ways of gardening and agriculture.
Good to see you, Corey.
Welcome,
Good to be
Corey.
here. Thank you.
Yay! My mentor.
yeah.
And
I'll hype you up.
If you guys want to support the show, keep the Canadian Prepper Podcast on the air, buy some swag. We've got the Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt and the tactical Velcro patch at www.prepperpodcast.ca. All proceeds help keep the lights on and the backup generator fueled.
If you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and like us on Facebook and submit a review on iTunes. Also, we want your feedback, good or bad, or just if there's a topic you want us to cover, you can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Hey, it's the first time run on that one. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Not bad. So we've got some green content for you in this episode. Not that kind of green, maybe not. We'll see.
Hey.
Blends
together, eh?
Yeah.
It is on the list.
So we're going to start off with some recent news, update our personal preps, and then we'll get into the main topic, which is getting started or figuring out your garden. So I'm not seeing too many news updates. I've got one here. It's kind of a bit of a crossover, I guess, between the two podcasts, but to do with the war in Ukraine, that Germany is now allowing Leopard tanks to be given and put into Ukraine. I put an article in there from the BBC, and I just want to take a couple minutes and read part of a note that a friend of mine put on a prepper kind of group that we're on, and just kind of talks about it. And I think it's a really good thing. And so if everybody just wants to bear with me for half a second here. So his post, he basically says, have you been paying attention to the situation in Ukraine? I hate to be the sky is falling kind of person, and I don't think we're there yet. But I think if you haven't been paying attention, you should. It is a war. Now NATO countries are sending a combined total of over 100 tanks, and the U.S. is committing to sending 31 more. If this is not an escalation, I don't know what is. Don't let normalcy bias bite you in the ass. Normalcy bias is where you know of a situation that's bad or potentially bad, but you fail to act because either in your location, everything seems relatively normal, or your brain refuses to register what is happening. Now is the time to prepare for long-term power outages, shortages of food, lack of medicines, and anybody who's been on this podcast or even been in a store knows we're already suffering from shortages of food and lack of medicine. Back, with a couple of months ago, you couldn't even get medicine for your kids. So, lack of or loss of water source and sewage utilities. Think about what you take for granted and ask yourself what you can do now to plan for not having that item. I think the next escalation is going to be war in Europe. With today's technology, war can hit our shores by some overseas computer hacker who shuts down the power grid. Anybody who's been paying attention a bit to this show, that I've been kind of harping on that for a while, saying, I'm not so concerned about an EMP or maybe an actual nuclear war. I'm scared to death of a cyber attack and cyber crimes. I mean, they've been hitting hospitals, they've been hitting pipelines. So, I mean, at the end of the day, what we're trying to get at is, don't let that normalcy bias leave you complacent. Pay attention to the evolving situation and stock up on your items and have a plan.
Heck, they're even putting microchips in certain phone chargers now that the people can actually hack in and actually go into your phone while you're charging them and take your pictures and information. So do your due diligence a lot. Or just go hug a tree and live like a hippie. Because, I mean, I'm on my way there and it seems a lot
Those are your
better.
two options basically now. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, just my opinion. Like I say again, this might be more for tomorrow night, but I think if Russia wanted to have invaded Ukraine and wiped them out, they would have done it already. I think they are taking the slow
Simple
approach.
numbers. You're right.
Yeah, they wanted to pull NATO into this war. NATO's like, well, we're not going to give you planes. We're not going to put troops on the ground. How many billions of dollars of rockets, missiles, ammunition, guns, armored personnel carriers, whatever, have they given to Ukraine? I mean, NATO, whether they want to admit it or not, there's already balls deep in this. So,
well, that's exactly it. And any court, right? If I lend my gun to someone to go hunting and they go commit a crime, it's my fault, right?
Yep.
I'm still charged all the same. I'm giving them the equipment to use in that case. So it's one of those. You're giving them the stuff. You got to be at least held accountable to some degree.
Yeah, I think it's only going to be a matter of time before it really ramps up to start to escalate, especially if they start throwing tanks in there. So again, like I've said, and like Kevin said in his post he put on there, just be prepared.
Yeah.
Don't sit around and wait for it to happen and then be ready to go. You need to be prepared. I know you've heard it from us 100 times, but you're going to hear it 101 times. So
I don't know who wrote this quote, but around Ottawa, I've seen it in 2 different places that I can think of off the top of my head. There's a sign that says the best protection in any emergency is knowing what to do.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
And I think of that as, I know what to do is get the stuff that I need here and try to get my friends and family to be prepared for a wide range of things. Nothing particular, nothing specific, but just be prepared for a wide range of stuff. Like you said, Jeff, the cyber attacks, economic fallout, EMPs, a civil war could break out here for all we know because of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. There's a lot of Russians and Ukrainians who live here, and there's a lot of people that support them or would go against either one that could start something going on.
No, it doesn't have to be Russian or Ukraine. It could just be, pick a side, and that's it. I mean, there's going to be, it's going to be one of those things where there's going to be a line drawn in the sand somewhere, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
and that's the, but that goes back to always having a plan, right? I mean, not having a plan is planning to fail. So always being ahead of the game, one step ahead. And that goes hand in hand with gardening as well, and the hydroponics that we're going to be talking about. Yep. Everything sort of goes into practice now while you can. Make the mistakes now. So that way, when it comes time, when you need it to work 100% of the time, it'll work 90% of the time, which is better
John.
than.
John, that's a perfect quote right there.
That's exactly it. Yes, sir. I believe that's art. Is that the Art of War? Is that it?
It seems like it, yeah.
I believe that's a quote from the Art of War.
Absolutely.
Oh, and there's that old saying, right? You can pull a weed, and if you get all of it, it's like ripping the spine out. It's like just like Mortal Kombat, where you're just tearing the spine out of your enemy. It's beautiful. It's
get over here.
It's cathartic.
All right. Well, with that, we'll move on to what we've done lately for preps.
Work. Eat, sleep, repeat. Do it all over again.
He lies. He's on a tropical island.
Yeah, right. This is just my green screen behind me, right?
That's right. He lies. Yeah, I'm telling you. I know him personally. Don't take his crap.
I actually was very happy that I made an Amazon order. Oh yes, Amazon. Bought a canning book. and it came in today.
Excellent.
It's just sitting over there. I can't reach it.
You didn't order
Um,
2?
No, I figured I'd try one. If it wasn't good, I'll throw it out and I'll try another one.
I meant for me. But
Just-
anyways,
just
continue.
burn it.
You live what? 11 kilometers from me? No big deal. Corey's not that
Disappointed.
far from either of us either,
No.
so no big deal.
Yeah, he probably has a pressure canner.
Oh, I do.
Oh, there
See?
you go.
I do.
Over
But
there,
that's
we
the thing. I mean, you can't always rely on the power to be there. So it's not the pressure cannon you got to worry about. It's all the hot baths and stuff too.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
valid.
Yeah.
So I got that book, added a few things to stockroom. Unfortunately, I'm still waiting on my pal to come in. Cleaned my Berkey today, the filters, the whole thing. Took it all apart, cleaned it, put it all back together. She's working fine. And yesterday I played with a couple of new pieces of equipment over at Pierre and Melissa's house. That was kind of fun.
Never
Learned some new
happened.
things.
You specifically said toys in your notes,
did.
so I was going to jump all over that, but
You should have.
To some, there are toys. To other, there are equipment.
They were in our bedroom alone. Just saying.
Yeah, but the door was open, so it don't count.
Yeah.
I did get
Wow.
pineapple juice.
Not from me.
so I just did a little bit of food prep and a little bit of fuel rotation. Now that we've got some snow, I'm spending the vast majority of my time out in my happy place, believe it or not, outside in the cold, grooming snowmobile trails. So I'm an avid rider. I want trails to ride on, so I have to go out and do it myself. So
Whatever works.
Oh, you got to earn it.
I was going to say,
That's
do it
right.
right the first time, right, Jeff?
absolutely.
There you go.
Once you set that good base, man, it's easy sailing just to maintain it.
Yeah, that's been the problem, obviously, with all the warm and everything was we just kept
Yeah.
losing the base. And some of our trails we can't open. I did pop through a swamp the other night. Nothing big, but you wouldn't want to try and take a snowmobile over it yet. So
Yeah.
we got to wait for the
Jesus.
cold, which is coming. But so
Yeah, the next few couple of days supposed to be about -30 where we are. So
Yeah.
I think Friday is hitting -30, and then it's going
Yeah.
like right up back up again to like
Yeah.
ridiculous.
our
Wow.
taxes hard at work right there.
That's right. Chemtrails. I mean, garden planning has been one of my things, obviously, since we're going into this podcast today. So I figured I might as well get a little bit of a head start. I am downgrading what we are planning on doing this year, just in case we do end up buying or building a house. So I'm focusing more on my herbs because we do have a rabbit, and we're getting into wanting to raw feed our dogs. So I want to make sure that I do have the stuff that's needed for that. We're doing more.
Are you prepping the crock pot for Rudy?
Well, I mean, it's personal size. I gotta go see Corey for the other one. So I mean, but we've been doing more house organization. Oh my God, organization again, just because like again, we don't know if we're moving or not. So we just want to make sure that everything is organized. And if shit does hit the fan, it just makes things a lot easier. Plus, we have been really focusing on making sure that we have what we like and what we will be able to survive off and not kill each other because we're, hungry and grumpy because we're eating stuff like canned beans and peas that we don't really enjoy. Well, peas I enjoy, but you know what I'm saying. Wedding stuff as usual. I got to watch Pierre and Brad clean our new equipment, so I mean that was fun. But I got to make a new T-shirt, so and design a few. That worked.
Excellent.
Yeah, what did you do, Corey?
I'm just getting some seeds ready. Now is a great time to actually go through your inventory of seeds, see what you got, get a plan going for your garden. That way, if you need to actually order any seeds, go to, trade. If you want to have a friend to trade and barter with, fantastic. Now is a good time to get the plans out there. Get your, and get the actual, the hard seeds that you need instead of just going through the books and saying, oh, that would look nice. Let's try that. That'll be fun. Now it's time to get your, where the rubber meets the road, get everything now. So when you have time to plant and it's time to plant, you can just go. So that's what I was doing. I actually have a CD Saturday, I think, in Brockville, and I was getting a whole bunch of packs. I think I have about 50 packs or so of the Three Sisters. So I'm going to be handing those out just to get people a little bit more aware of gardening, get them into something that's simple and has a little bit of heritage to it, a little bit of history, and it's a little story that people can tell if someone comes over to their house. They can just tell them, oh yeah, I planted the Three Sisters and so forth and so on.
we're gonna touch base on that too. I did note that later on in the companion planting section because it is a very
Fantastic.
interesting thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Mm.
Well,
So,
with that, then,
Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I guess unless you had something else to add, I was going to move on to the main topic. Okay,
Carry
well, with
on.
that,
Kill
we'll move
plants.
on to the main topic. For me, it's how not to kill plants. I don't know about anybody else, but for me,
Yeah, I get
it's
that. I
not
get that a
how to
lot.
kill plants. So I'll turn it over to our
Jesus.
two resident experts, Mel and Corey, and have a go at it.
All right. Well, first and
Breaking everything.
foremost, it's you don't know. It's not that you kill plants. It's you're finding out ways that they don't want to live.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to put the positive spin on it, right? It's not
Okay,
that.
fair enough,
Yeah. It because that's the whole thing. Gardening is just a big experiment. What works for some people doesn't work for everybody. So to sit there and say you kill plants, no, you're finding out how not to make it live. There's a huge gap there. All right. Well, gardening can be frustrating. It can be absolutely overwhelming. It can be very defeating, right? You just want to give up. You don't really want to deal with it anymore. Then the weeds come into play. You work all this time, blood, sweat, tears, and you get a tomato that's this big, right? But all of it comes back to you just have to listen to Mother Nature because we've missed that part. We're forgetting this part now where we have to pay attention to the signs that Mother Nature is telling us, to the signs that the earth is telling us. We're not reading those signs anymore. We just expect them to, to happen because they happen on an app, right? We have a game that's a gardening game on an app and it just works. So why doesn't it work in real life? It takes a little bit more than just clicking buttons. You have to actually pay attention and sort of ground yourself to Mother Nature again.
Yeah, again, that's where that whole hippie thing comes into play
Yeah.
because it is a big part. Like it really truly is. Like just to touch base before we get into this, but like I was actually doing research on the I forget what the technical name is, but it's basically taking a stick and wrapping copper wire on it and you shove it in the ground to help the plants because again, our earth corrects its makes its own energetic energy. And that feeds the plants, and they have their own. And I know it sounds really spiritual and hippy-dippy, but look into it. I'm telling you.
Well, even just the copper alone, it will react with the soil, and it will probably allow some micronutrients out of it. That's going into territory that's a bit out of my expertise, but anything that goes into the soil and then gets wet will react with that soil. So if you're putting a copper pipe in the soil, you're right. You're gonna obviously increase the copper. You might even increase the iron, the zinc, whatever the case may be, whatever the metal compounds are, right?
Same as hormones same as a hormone in body, right? Once you play something out of play. Yeah.
So that's one of those things where again, it's all about reading what the soil needs, and after that, it's making small minor adjustments. But it's fun. It's a big connect the dots game that you don't know what the end of the picture is going to be, and you never will. It's fantastic.
It is because again, like just like the hydroponics portion of it, right? It's almost the same thing in the soil. Like you still have what is the city putting in your water? What does your well have in its water that you're feeding your plants? What does your rainwater have? How are you collecting that rainwater? Is it coming off your roof? You know, 1,000 birds shit on your roof, and now you're getting that into your rainwater, and how's that affecting your plants too? Like it does play all in effect, and you have to watch stuff like that too, because when you're ingesting that, you're ingesting what your plant has taken in as well. It's again like the human body, right?
And that's one of the big reasons hydroponics is a bit of a touch and go with a lot of old school gardeners, because again, the soil sort of takes away most of that. What would it be? Biohazard from animal waste, right? It sort of filters it through. But when you're just taking rainwater, like you said, off your roof and it's not filtered, then you're putting that into a container and you're saying, oh, I'll just use this for aquaponics or hydroponics rather. That's where problems start to happen. That's where waterborne diseases, and that's where you can get very sick. So it's much like canning, right? You got to be very careful. Botulism is a hell of a thing.
Yes, it is.
So
and that's
it all goes together. You just got to pay attention.
And even like you touched base on the aquaponics as well, you can use that into your hydroponics as well. And using tapioca fish that they nutrient, but if they get sick and that filters into your plants, now you're potentially catching what they. So it's again, like you said, it's all an experiment, and that's why you want to really start small on a small scale, because you can end up getting yourself into trouble, and you don't want to. And again, that's the same thing. Like, with soils, you got to be careful because the one thing, like, I am a medical cannabis licensed grower, and the one thing that I was doing as a mistake was I was actually putting shrimp castings into
Yep.
my soil because of the nutrients. But you don't want to do that in the house because when that breaks it down, now you're releasing different things into the air, and when you're playing with the soil, you're introducing that into whatever. And I didn't know that until I talked to my local place that specialize in that. And they told me that. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, you're altering the soil because it's not like a big, large area, right? It's more of a condensed area. Anything you do to that soil is going to be extreme. So say
Yeah.
you're adding eggshells and you add, 24 eggshells. Well, now the calcium in the soil is going to be through the roof.
Which
Right.
can be potent to the plant.
Exactly.
Right?
If you're adding blood meal every day, your nitrogen is going to be just skyrocketing, but your phosphorus and potassium are going to be next to nothing. So it's all about balance. And again,
It is.
your leaves, your plant, they'll all tell you these things. It all just takes the time to actually the old stop and smell the roses.
Exactly.
Stop.
No,
Just stop. Look at it, and the plant will tell you. If you see the plant's wilty, the plant's yellow, maybe it needs some water, maybe it's lacking some nutrients or deficiencies. Then you go and you read a book, right? And you find out like, oh, there's little like mold spots, right? There's the leaves are falling off and they're
I
wilting.
just call Corey.
Well, it's one of those things. I've made enough mistakes that I've helped enough people. It's I like to say I'm not the smartest guy. I have the confidence to know I know nothing. Right.
Yep.
But I'm humble enough to know that I know enough. So I've made
I
enough
always
mistakes
love
in
when
my
you say
time.
that.
Well, I
I
made
always
enough
love when you
mistakes in
say
my
that.
time to save people the hassle and the headache. Now, that being said, there's millions of ways to do stuff. My way is not the way, it's a way. So if I tell someone to do something, or if I say this is a great way to do it, that's not the only way to do it. It might not work for you. It might work for someone else, might work for me. Because
And again, like I said, like that to me and my beliefs, that comes down to the spirituality, the attachment you have, right? If you're not energetically there, and again, it also falls on the more mundane aspect of things that, like, if you're more knowledgeable, right? Like it's just one of those things that, like, just trial and error. Like I
Yep.
don't know, like, as like Brad can contest to this. Like I had over like $1,500 worth of plants in my house. My house looked like a goddamn like jungle. I had things growing, house, like, you name it. And then the one thing that killed my stuff is spider mites, because
Spider
someone
mites.
yes.
in our
Aphid
rental,
spider mites.
someone in our rental decided to try one year to grow marijuana. Well, they introduced them into here, so now, well, they attack everything but like 3 different types of plants I have. So, and anyways, that's like a whole different other thing for
Yeah,
that.
that
Yeah,
causes
so-
that's a triggering action is what that is.
Yeah,
so
because like
let's.
Oh.
No, I was going to say let's touch on a couple of the growing methods. I guess you mentioned hydroponics and maybe soil. What's the best soil mixes? Depending on where you live, what type of soil you have, what can you grow, that kind of stuff. So
I would really recommend you to be very careful to watch what kind of soil you do get at your local stores, because like that, a lot of that stuff, I personally don't find it's good. You can really mix your own with like, what's the one? I'm trying to think of it. Like you could do cocoa fiber or coconut fibers. You can add your lye into there. You can make your own with the perlite and sand and different rocks. Even the clay lava stones are really good too. You can add that into your actual soil if you're doing indoors, because it allows just for drainage, because you want to mimic whatever the plant grows into. And that's the same thing with hydroponics. Again, with hydroponics, you can use the basket. There's the foam inserts that you can do. You can even use the lava stones within that too. And the best thing about the lava stones is that once you're done with them, you rinse them, re-sanitize them, and then you're good to go again, all over again. So, and that's the other thing when you're, especially being on a prepping podcast, that's one thing that's very important, is that something that you can always reuse, especially for long periods of time. So that is something to think about. So, and the biggest thing with hydroponics is you want to always make sure that you are constantly changing your water, so that you don't end up with any problems. That is the one big thing. And just like soil, you want to watch what you're doing inside your house. You don't want to have anything that's going to decompose or decay, because it's going to release a lot of stuff outside. Completely different story.
how
Completely
often
different
then
story.
would you rotate the water in your hydroponics?
It should be 2 to 3 weeks, depending on. You got to
I
keep a
overdid
close
it.
eye.
I overdid it and did it every week just to get into that habit. But I mean, I have OCD when it comes to everything, so
Not a
I
bad thing.
just really no. So I just like took it like that, and you got to make sure you got to watch out. Don't over nutrient, and just take it slow, like Corey was saying. And my biggest thing was I was overwatered. I gave too much love to my plants. So just watch what your plants do.
Well,
But
and that's actually a very common thing is the overwatering. Plants, if you overwater a plant, look at it this way. I mean, they get lazy, right? So if there's always water there, the roots are going to stay at the surface because they don't have to work really hard for it. Okay. Now, say you water once every 2 weeks, once every week or so, depending on the humidity in your house.
Mhm.
Those roots now, especially if you bottom water, those roots have to go down deep. They actually have to work for the water.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's going to create a more vigorous plant, a healthier plant, because the roots are now going to go down deeper and they're going to reach out further instead of just staying at the top.
and if you
That's
add a
gonna-
fan, if you add a fan to that as well with bottom watering, you actually build a stronger stalk, which
Yep.
will give you a better base for your plant as well.
So that being said, we'll go back to hydroponics real quick. Now, like I said, I'm more of a heritage guy. I've dabbled into it a little bit. I've personally found that the setup, the maintenance that you have to do, it's basically a constant thing you got to pay attention to, because it's always about testing the water, making sure that the nutrients is always it's there, checking to see if there's any microbes, bacterias, things like that. I don't have time for that. People do. I mean, it's great for city people and things like this. It's great to experiment and try. But for me, I was more soil to dirt. That's pretty much my take on it. But again, aquaponics, hydroponics, it's not a new thing. It's been around since the pyramids and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
Yeah, which is epic. We should move into the seeds, since everybody's pretty well got a bit of a thing, and I see some questions coming up. We'll get to them as well. I'm not forgetting about them. During this cold season, what plants do you recommend to start?
Right now, you're looking at, because it's still early, right? It's still early. But if you're looking at things, brassicas are a good thing. They like to get started early. Broccoli, cabbage. Anytime you want to start lettuce, it's never a bad idea, because you can always take those microgreens and those lettuces and you can chop them up early. They might take a bit of time to get going. Put them in the windowsill though. And if it's just any way to save a buck. Okay. Now, saving seeds from those are going to be a bit of a hassle, so don't count on that. But it's just for the fact, if you're ever in a pinch and you need something, lettuce anytime. Absolutely. But right now, if you want to start something and you want to get a head start, you are kind of early, still in zone 5. Everywhere else is out of my range right now. I can help you, but I'll take a bit of time to read it. But zone 5, you're sort of ahead of the game. You need about another month or so.
About another month or so. I was just going to ask what time would be a good time.
I would say, March. March is when you'd want to try and start maybe your hot peppers, because the hot peppers take a bit more time than your sweet peppers. And anything to do with your brassicas, because they can handle the cold.
Those are classed as cold crops, and some of those can actually hand up over the winter as well, all depending on how you
can cover them, you can bury them. Kale especially. Brussels sprouts. I know Brussels sprouts almost need a frost before they get nice and sweet, otherwise they're just too bitter. So things along that nature, where the brassicas can handle it. They almost like it, to the points where onions as well. Onions, start them early, get them in there, because they can be.
Garlic.
Garlic should have been planted in October, November.
Oh shit! So
like latest November. Okay, my rule of thumb, I like to do this. It's a bit late though, but I like to get it in before Halloween, because garlic keeps the vampires away.
That's cute. That's a good way to remember it, though.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. It's all these little tricks, right? So it doesn't really matter, but you want to try and get it in before the soil freezes, or you can get it out early, right as the soil is workable, and you can do that. Same with your carrots, basically anything that can handle the cold, asparagus, things of that nature.
The one thing I do recommend that I tend to do, or maybe even suggest more so than recommend, I always start a small batch and I wait a week or 2 and start another batch, so that you're always having a bit of a crop come up and you're not having everything come out at once. Because let me tell you, that's so overwhelming. It's unreal. Trust me, I get that every year with my cannabis, and I just
Mhm.
that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
But it happens. But like, you want to take that space in between to get that going too.
Yep. And no, and that's the other thing too with companion planting. We'll touch on that too. Where if you pull up a plant, you kind of need another plant to put in there, right? Otherwise, you just have this void,
That's
this big
valid.
vacant spot. So you get to touch on that as well. But absolutely,
Yeah. Well, to touch
So
back, it kind of. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
go ahead and then I'll ask.
Oh no, go ahead because I was going to transfer into the seed part. So go ahead.
Well, that might be part of it. What I was going to ask is if you're starting something indoors, can you more or less start almost anything you want indoors, or is there only stuff that
there are some
goes
things that you
outdoors
need to
and-
start outside. Some
Yeah.
things don't. Yeah, some things don't like to be started inside. Some things don't like to be tampered with. Beans are a big one. Beans just prefer to be put outside. Peas, there are people that do peas. I've seen people do peas in like an eaves trough, right? But then they slide it out of the entire eaves trough, and it's like they're not being touched. They don't like to be transplanted at all. So there are some things that prefer just to be planted in the ground. So it's always nice to actually read, and that's a big thing too. When you get the seed packs, read what you're planting. Because it'll tell you, it's simple as that. It'll tell you the seed spacing. It'll tell you the depth that the seed has to go. Now, obviously, they're talking about ideals. I'm not going to sit there with a measuring tape or a ruler to make sure I put the seed an eighth of an inch in the ground. Geez, Murphy, who has time for that? But it's just a nice little guideline for anyone who it gets it in the back of your brain rather. And then you start to just remember, oh, wait, they don't like to be transplanted. They don't like to be touched. They like to be left alone. Pumpkins, right? You can start pumpkins in a greenhouse and all this stuff, but transplanting them, there's going to be more of a shock to their roots than just planting them outside.
Yeah. And the one thing I've noticed too is growing peas inside the house, your stalk is so thin compared to what you get outside. It's unbelievable. It's almost like they go into some sort of shock and
Well,
they force
nothing's better
themselves
than mother's milk. Sunlight
that
is key, and if it's God.
it is. No, it very well is. And like no matter I don't care how much you sit there and say that, oh well, grow lights. Like let me tell you, you can't get 100% of what you're getting from the actual real sun into your house. You can try, but it doesn't work the exact same. Like
Well, there's a reason you have to harden off your plants when you put them outside because it's just not the same.
Yeah.
So, quick question for you, Corey.
Shoot.
You were saying the peas in the eaves trough.
Yeah.
So if I planted them in the eaves trough, like obviously you get a good soil mix, cover off both the ends so that nothing falls out. Plant them in there, correct spacing, whatever. How long, like how tall should they be, and then slide them into the ground?
They got to be just enough that they're actually past the cotyledon. So once they actually have the true leaf. Okay. So once they're past that first stage, they got a good root base. They're actually getting nutrients to the soil. It's going up the stalk. You know that they're going, right?
Yeah.
You want to just take one of those ends off, like you put on, so the soil doesn't go anywhere. Dig a trench that's the same size as your eaves trough, and then slowly push them out.
Huh.
Right. So and then basically it just slides out like a sausage out of a casing. Yep. And then it all just goes in the ground. You bury it up. Really, if you do it right, the roots don't even know they were touched.
So should I the little trough that I make in the ground
should be the same size as the eaves trough?
Well, I was just going to say like I shouldn't make it any deeper than the eaves trough. Nope. So when I put it in, I don't cover.
That's the thing. As soon as that little sprout goes, these aren't potatoes. These are peas. Yeah. So once you get to that point, right, that's where the plant wants to be. If you cover that up, you're going to be asking for disease, any bugs that want to come along, cutworms, for example, they might come along and just nip that and you're done. Right now, you might get lucky, but at the same time, where that plant sprouts up from the soil, that's where the plant wants to be. There are exceptions to the rule, but that's usually how it goes.
Sweet. Good thing I got my eaves trough done last year and I kept the old one.
There you go. See, repurpose, reuse.
Prepare.
And then we do know that like with seeds that there is a few different ways to start. We did touch base on a few of them. Like we do have cold germination, which it has to legitimately be shoved in your fridge, freezer, outside and forgotten about. Obviously you can't do it in freezing cold winter weathers, let's be honest. But like stuff like strawberries and lavender are key things to actually cracking them. And actually, I'll admit something. I actually found that out tonight when I was doing research for this podcast because I was always wondering why my lavender seeds would never crack. Now I know why.
You must score them.
Mm-hmm. So besides good, we've already touched straight to soil like peas and pumpkins. They love just going right to soil, starting their roots from there. You also have light germination like tobacco and cigar. And what I mean by light germination is the fact that you legitimately can take like those peat moss cups and you touch the seeds, put it to your soil, and let it go. Spray your water on it and just let it grow because they need that light to actually crack the shell and start their things up. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
She tells no lies.
No, I don't.
Mhm.
And again, for any type of germination, you can always do the good old trick, especially like when I do cannabis. I use a paper towel, you wet it, you throw it in the fridge, it cracks the seeds. I've also done cannabis too, where I've actually created heat or humidity instead of the cold, because again, like Corey said, experiment. So, I mean, I've gotten a good crack rate regardless. And a good trick that I've always used is soak my seeds in hydrogen peroxide just to kill off anything on the outside. Because again, I am ingesting this to my lungs most of the time. What else do I have here? Cinnamon for seedlings is actually good too because the antimicrobial and bacterial and fungal stuff that they have, and also for seedlings. Now, the one thing I did find out with cinnamon with seedlings is you can overdo it with cinnamon, and it will choke the stalk and the roots out.
So
So
you saying you
Did not know
actually
that.
put cinnamon in the soil?
I legitimately take it and I just lightly sprinkle it on top and I just water as normal because when some of them, especially with warm germination, you're creating that heat, that environment. So
Mhm.
mold's easy to come out and you get like that white fuzzy mold, which I mean isn't dangerous or anything, but I personally don't like to see anything moldy and me put it in my ground. I don't like to deal with that. So again, OCD. But yeah, I just
Fun
put
guy
cinnamon.
is good guy, huh? Come on.
So depending, there is some bad stuff out there, but like I find the cinnamon actually will decrease that for me as well. So, and with
Okay,
the warming
interesting.
meths, and with the warming meths that you can use to help with germination and even growing, depending on what you're growing, you can like with the ones I have, I can adjust my temperature, and I even have a humidity thing. I got a whole air system, filter stuff with my tents and everything. So, yeah.
Well, it's a big thing because again, you have to know what you're growing, right? And you're talking about growing cannabis. It's a tropical plant. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a weed. They call it a weed for a reason. It doesn't take much to grow. You can put it in pretty much anything, right? But it is a tropical plant. It loves humidity. It loves the hot weather. So doing a heat mat, right? You're going to increase your germination, and it's going to actually explode on you if you do it proper.
Yes, I've seen that happen too because I've
Yeah.
experimented. I've messed with well, actually by accident, I messed with my lights too when it comes to because again, you're trying to mimic the outside when you grow into something like a tent, right? And I messed up my grow cycles for cannabis, so I ended up with short plants. But like, let me tell you, the crystals on them are amazing until the spider mites got a hold of them. But other than that, like, it was just cute to see like this little plant, but like it was big, bushy, and whatever. So it's just really cool to see how when you manipulate something how it actually like reacts back to it.
Mhm.
So here's a question.
Shoot.
I don't. So I got an arrow garden for Christmas. So that obviously, I mean, you know what that is. You
Yep.
put that, it's got the light now.
Yep.
Can I use
The
that
hydroponic.
to start to grow something and then transplant it, or because that's a different light from a sunlight, would it mess it up, or am I best to just go with the arrow garden and
What
start
you
to
have
finish?
there is a small hydroponic station. That's all it is. Okay.
Exactly
Now
what it is.
it has a grow medium, all the same, because the seeds need at least a grow medium so they don't just get flushed out into the water.
Mhm.
After all that's said and done, you're going to have a solid root mass at the bottom of that. Now, those roots, they don't care if it's water, they don't care if it's soil, as long as there's nutrients that they can get. Now, the difference is with water is it's readily available, right? They'll just suck up the water with the nutrients. When it's in soil, it's a little bit more it's more difficult because it might not be in all the spots at once, right? The roots might have to go out and venture for it, and that's why you're going to have a slower growth rate. Maybe not have a what's the word, healthier plant or a bigger harvest. When it comes to hydroponics, you're going to have everything controlled, okay, for the most part. So that being said, you can take those plants that you grew in your hydroponic setup and move them right outside. As long as they're being hardened off properly, they're going to take right off and just go.
That's key. Hardening is key because
But
again,
yeah, that's it. You got to harden them off.
Yeah, because like you're playing God, if you will, to the plant. So with the type of artificial light that you're giving it, it's going to go into some sort of shock. And expect your plant to go into shock. It's okay to go into shock. It's okay to see die off. It's okay as long as your plant is coming back. You're good to go. Like you just watch it because it's got to go through its life cycle anyways, right?
Yeah. Well,
What do you mean when you said hardening it?
Yeah, I was going to say hardening off is a process all in itself. I mean, that's more of that is probably where my stress goes through the roof, because it could be one day, right? Hey, buddy, could be one day where, all of a sudden the weather changes and your plants are outside and you think it's going to be a nice night and it drops down to -4. Well, game over, right? Or all of a sudden you're outside and it's supposed to be a cloudy day and then the sun comes out and the UV's at 7. Your plants are burnt, right? So the best way to do this, if you're having plants inside and you're growing them inside, you're starting with indoor lights, keep a fan on them for one, if they're inside. That wind is going to create a little bit of a natural effect and it's going to create a bit of a stronger stalk because they are, waving back and forth in the wind. There's going to be that natural motion where they got to get a little bit sturdier base, right? Once you move them outside, keep them in the shade. Don't do it for a whole day. Maybe start for like 2 hours, but keep them in the shade. And then you want to slowly progress your time that they spend outside. That's why cloudy days are great. They're fantastic, but you got to try and keep them in the shade. Maybe put them in the sun for an hour, depending on the sun. Keep an eye on them. If you see them start to wilt, bring them in. Don't even play that game. If the sun's too hot, keep them in. Try to keep it whereas the UV is as low as possible. That way the shock to your plant is minimal. I mean, there's going to be a shock to your plant. It'd be like living your entire life inside and then taking a step outside. The sun's going to be bright, right? You're going to feel it. You're going to know.
One trick.
No, and that's it. It's all about just taking your time, because all that time that you're putting into this now, where you're planning, you're preparing, you're watering, it could all go out the window in 20 minutes.
It can, yeah. And the one thing a trick that I do use is we have a lot of burlap because we hunt. So I do use the burlap, especially if the UV is really high or if the sun, whatever. I just kind of cut between because they still need to adapt to the heat and the atmosphere. Because again, pulling from your house to outside is completely different. So I mean, it all plays in a part. I know it sounds silly, but it really does. It really does.
No, and again, that's something that everyone should practice. I mean, if you just do that just to practice hardening them off, and you don't even plant them in the garden, it's a fantastic way to understand what you have to do if the situation goes south, because a lot of people will lose a lot of produce. I would have to say in just that transition alone, if they don't fully understand, going from a controlled climate environment to Mother Nature's at her full force.
And it works the same way too. Like if you're taking deck plants off your deck back into the house for the winter, it's the same thing. You got a hard on, I guess you can say, on this situation.
Put them in a dark corner and see what happens.
Yeah. So
they're gonna regret ever coming inside, and they're gonna resent you ever touching them.
Oh yeah, they're gonna get all types of angry. To answer Darius's question here, what is the best option for people in apartments who have limited space? Honestly, get it on your walls.
I love this question. I love this question because everyone always says, I don't have space. I was like, no, you don't. What you're lacking is the imagination. All right. You can grow in anything. You can grow in tubes. You can grow in 2-liter bottles. You can grow in old work boots. As long as the water will drain out of it, you can put dirt in it and grow something. All right.
You can take those tubes, like Corey was saying, and put them on your wall. You can even run hydroponics on your wall with those PCP piping. You just need to put it on an angle and have a drum, and then have a Rubbermaid bucket with a pump that comes back up and filters the water. Like it's that simple. People just don't take a second to think outside the box.
That's right.
Right.
The only limit is your imagination. You got to just anything that you think that you can do. But chances are gardening.
But here they're saying they want to be inside the box.
But no, that would be the best. Yeah, exactly. Trellis, wall hangers, hanging baskets.
Live walls.
Yeah, living walls. But again, living walls. That is a process. if you have
It
the time
is,
for it.
but-
If you just want something as simple as, I mean, there's you get Home Depot buckets, right? And you make a little pyramid in the corner where you have 3 and then you have 2 and then you have 1, right? It's like a little tiered system, and you can have
Yep.
little holes where you water 1 at the very top, and that filters down into the 2, and then that 2 will filter into the 4, and you're off to the races. You can have everything that you want. I mean, you obviously wouldn't be able to grow watermelons and things like that in an apartment, but you wouldn't
Come
need
on,
to.
why not?
Oh, you could try, absolutely. Don't say you can't. But if you're just looking at the minimalistic things, you'd want your tomatoes, your peppers, some herbs, things that you can take readily, can preserve, lots of tomato sauce, right?
Yep.
Because in the end, carbs king, spaghetti's going to rule, right? And you can't just eat that plain.
Yeah.
To answer Darius's next question before we go off to the next thing, with
Get
cats,
rid of the cats.
that because they belong in a barn. They belong in a
I'm a
barn.
ventriloquist
sorry.
too.
I'm sorry, I love you, Darius, but yes, they belong in a barn in my mind. No, but in all seriousness, make sure you research what plants are okay for cats, because if they do get a hold of them, the last thing you want to do is harm your cat, right? Like at the end of the day. But they're assholes, and they will get into your plants if they want to. So you can try putting up netting or something around it. It may look what's the word I'm looking for? Cluttered or whatever, but if it's working for you and you got a food source inside your house, that's all that matters at the damn end of the day, right? Like
Function over fashion.
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, there's been stories of people using plastic forks and things like this, but then I've seen pictures of the cats laying on the plastic forks. Right.
Or the tin foil, the sticky
So
tape, or
it
anything.
really all depends on your cat, I think. But I think after a while, once the, even just a spray bottle, the old fashioned spray bottle full of water, the cat's doing something you don't like, just hit it with the water. Eventually it'll learn. And if it doesn't learn, well, there's always the get rid of the cat.
Yeah. So just to jump in, since we're talking about home stuff, there's a few things that I did write down tonight that you can actually just take from your house that some people most of the time have in their house to use for pretty well anything when it comes to their plants, like coffee. Coffee's a great source of nitrogen. It has some potassium and phosphorus in it, and it's also slow releasing. And if you again back to the exactly, and back to like the cinnamon again, if you when you letting it dry out, sprinkle some cinnamon over it to once again aid in that mold, so you don't get that, because again, you don't want to introduce that to your plants.
And a lot of those things too will actually ward off some pests, like coffee, cinnamon. They're very pungent, potent smells to a lot of these critters. So it'll keep a lot of the chipmunks and the squirrels, like that, all the ones that you don't want in your garden. It should keep them away, or at least give you another barrier too.
Yeah, and now that you've touched on,
quick question: coffee grounds.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
How would I store them? Like if I started to save my coffee grounds now, what should I do to them to make them not mold by the time I use them on my plants?
Tray or plate, let it dry out, and then store them in a mason jar.
That's exactly.
Ziploc, vacuum seal bag.
Because basically, what you're using the coffee for is done.
Yeah.
Right, it's done. But that's like saying, well, I just bled this chicken. What do I do with the blood? Well, you can either put it in a hole or you can let it dry so it becomes a powder, right? And then you use that as blood meal. It's all the same as coffee grounds. You just basically dry it out, then you can pummel it up, do whatever you got to do, sprinkle some on. It's all the same at that point. It's just an organic fertilizer.
Mel, can I borrow a dehydrator?
Yeah, I got you.
Sweet.
Darius, wait. So use coffee grounds will work for planting? Yes, they will. Mix it in the soil.
It increases the nitrogen, but you got to be careful not to do too much, because then if you have too much nitrogen, it almost becomes there's this theory about the law of minimums, and if there's too much of one thing, it can't suck up everything. So it's only the least nutrient, right? So if you have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, if your potassium's at a 30%, that's your lowest, that's all the plant can take up. So the best idea, right? This is just a theory, but the best idea is to try and get everything at a nice, even, we'll say 60%, 70%, because you'll never get anything at 100%. It just won't happen, because they're always going to be counteracting each other. There'll be decay and just, life goes on. So there's always going to be fluctuations. So you try your best just to try and make it as even as possible. But by adding a whole bunch of blood meal or coffee grounds, you're increasing the nitrogen so much so that you're actually going to burn your plants.
and to balance it, like he's asking now, it's just honestly start off with the soil mixture, and if you want, touch base with me, and I can give you a mixture to start off with. But just start off with that. Like I cheat the system at times. I
Yeah,
buy
these are
Gaia.
good questions.
Yeah, they are. I buy Gaia. Shit. It's Gaia something, and it
I don't
comes
even.
with the
I know what you're talking about. Don't remember what it's called either.
Brad's seen my garden with this stuff. It works amazing. And like they have a whole line full of everything, but like they have a starting soil. And this has, I think, 3 months worth of nutrients jam packed in that soil. So when you plant your specific plant to this soil, because different plants need different things, right? Some need more acidic, where some just needs a balanced soil. Um, you don't touch it. Don't do anything. Let it run its 3 months course, and you watch your plant. Because again, like Corey said, something in your soil, in your ground, if you're doing it outside, could be throwing off that soil that you gave. But if you're doing it in the house, you can balance it. There's also pH meters if you're doing hydroponics. Again, like the chlorine pool testing things you can get, and that just helps you wash your balance with everything.
That would be probably rule number one. What's in your soil? Because
Thank you,
that's the
Pierre.
question. Yeah, no one really knows what's in your soil other than like I don't know, right? Oh, hang on a second. I don't know what's going on in my soil unless I test it. It's invisible.
And that's
Right?
actually a
And-
good starting point, like you were saying. Like, take your soil and test it. You can break it down into those pool things. You put a little bit of soil with some water, and you shake it all up, and you add the things, and it will read it. Like,
Well, that's actually just going to tell you if you have clay soil, loomy soil, or like silt and clay and sand. That's a fantastic experiment to do. That'll tell you
And
exactly your breakdown of if you have too much clay, you can add this and that and make it a nice little loom, right?
mhm.
But what I'm saying is that the whole pH balance, that's something that's invisible. You actually have to have a test for that.
Yeah.
Now, adding things to the soil is going to take a lot, right? If you have a garden and you're just going to be adding things to it, you got to remember you're adding into almost a bottomless pit. Because
Mhm.
when it rains and things, it's going to deplete itself. It's going to wash away. They'll be percolating down and things of this nature. So everything's going to be washed away. You're going to have to keep adding things in. So it's going to take a bit of time, right? If your soil's been bastardized a little bit and hasn't been taken care of, right? So don't think it's just going to happen overnight. Even if you add a couple dump trucks worth of good stuff, eventually, yeah, it'll come to a nice organic matter. But give it time. That's patience. Gardening is patience.
My good trick that I started actually a year ago. What? No, 2 years ago actually. I took a smaller Home Depot bucket and I drilled a shit ton of holes in it, and I put it right into my garden, and I kept the lid, and I put all my table scraps into that, and I put it at the actual corner of my garden, away from kind of my plants. And then every year I was just gonna pick it up and kind of like shimmy it around to kind of help the garden, because my 3 plots that I made here at a rental, it was shit soil, like it really was. So I've been slowly reworking at it and building it up for the last 3 years. I even had Pierre, if you're still on, what was that mixture that our neighbors gave us? Because it was really good quality, deep, rich, soft, like topsoil. It grew my plants beautifully. I don't know if you remember either, Brad, but it worked
No, that was
well.
from the guys down close to the 417, right?
Yeah, Calco, I think it was.
Calco
Yeah.
soils.
Something. It was a nice, rich, like topsoil, and it grew everything beautifully. Triple mix. That's what they call it at
Okay.
Calco.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it was
No, that's
beautiful.
basically just sand, topsoil, and a like a compost material. It'd just be organic compost.
Which is excellent for vegetables and stuff like that too. Just before I hit the questions, I just want to touch base on the home stuff, because I
That's
don't want to
exactly
hold
what I was
them.
going to say, Dan. Absolutely. You'd want to do some some leafy greens back in there. It'd be something that's quick and easy. They won't really interfere with the tree, and the tree won't interfere with them too much. And the kale would work. It might actually, I wouldn't go with the potatoes so much, but definitely some lettuce, leafy greens, some mesclun, what would it be, spinach, all that good stuff. They love the
What
shade.
about clover?
Oh,
I don't.
clover could grow.
Dan-
Here it's just a weed.
Dandelion too.
Yep.
Is it really good live
All those will volunteer themselves in mass without question.
Yeah. Another good household stuff is Epsom salts. I tend to use this with my with my marijuana as well. It also helps the seeds germinate, which I've never tried myself, but I mean, it helps the plants grow bushier, produces more flowers, increases the chlorophyll, which is the beautiful green color of your plants. It also helps deteriorates pests such as slugs and voles, which I thought was pretty cool. And bananas is another.
Garden
go
bugs are
ahead.
neat. No, garden
They
bugs are
are.
fantastic.
They are. Bananas help with calcium, which promote root growth, which I mean, we want to have that good stable next to our stock.
Quick
Also,
question. Bananas, as in the fruit or the skin?
Skin.
the skin.
Skin.
Me,
Thought
it's
so, but
okay.
just wanted-
This is going to be one of those perfect ways to just sort of interject with compost tea. Now, I don't know if anyone knows about compost tea, but compost tea is fantastic. It's not really utilized much. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go. So no, I was just gonna say, Brad, you've seen it where you've come to my house, and in the picture, I've had a bunch of bananas peels shoved in it, and like I'm brewing.
I know what you're talking about. but
So
Yeah.
basically, yeah,
clarify
it's
for
just
everybody
a,
else. Is it
yeah.
the fruit or is it the skin? And I know it's the skin just to ask the
Yeah.
question.
no, yeah, you eat the fruit, yeah, and then the skin goes where it belongs. Yeah,
In
you
the
basically just put it into a big jug of water, let it sit there for maybe a week. You can take that out, throw it in your compost at that point because then it'll break down. All that
Mhm.
water is now filled with a nice potassium-rich water, which is essentially just plant food. All right. I mean, you
Yeah.
could drink it all the same, but it's a nice plant food that is just going to instantaneously, like hydroponics. There's no fighting for those nutrients. The plants can absorb them right away because they're in the water. No fuss, no muss, and the extra will be put into your soil. Increase the potassium in your soil. Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. Like you said, it helps with the photosynthesis, and it actually has a lot of magnesium in it. Side note: if you have sore muscles, banana water is good for you too. Um, so I guess we've touched base on a lot with cinnamon, which everybody kind of gets the fact that accelerates growth, helps with germination, antifungal and stuff like that. I think we got okay. So, do you want to move into companion planting since we've already covered the questions too that I see?
Absolutely.
All right. So, do you want to touch base on the three sisters?
Yes. See.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Perfect. So with the
Good call,
quickness,
Jeff.
Perfect. The three sisters. All right. Well, it's basically it is what the Native Americans used to plant. It was basically a symbiotic relationship between three types of plants, which is corn, beans, and squash. All right. So the first thing you'd want to do is you want to plant your corn, and you plant your corn as soon as the ground's ready to be worked, and as soon as the corn is about, we'll say 3 inches, right, out of the ground, you plant your beans. All right. A week after that, you want to plant your squash.
Do you
Now,
want the beans to germinate up
You want
yet,
you want the corn, and then you want to
corn
plant the beans, and then a week later plant the squash. The beans will not take time; they will go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're gonna go. So don't worry about them; they'll do what they got to do. So the whole theory is here. It's a nice symbiotic relationship between these three plants, because the corn, right, which takes a lot of nutrients out of the soil, it's a heavy eater. It's going to
Mhm.
rise up out of the soil. The beans, which are a nitrogen fixer, all right, they're going to help bring nitrogen back into the soil for the corn. So while they grow up, and then the beans actually use the corn as something to crawl up. So they're using it as a stalk to crawl.
As a
And then while the squash is growing, those giant leaves that are growing on the squash, they're going to act as sort of a weed suppressor, and they're also going to keep the soil from losing a lot of the moisture. Okay, so it's almost
shade.
acting like a hat.
ground cover.
Okay, so that's basically the how it works. Now all of these things will be harvested at basically the same time. Okay, so you'd have your beans, your corn, and your squash, your winter squash, whether it be pumpkins, acorn squash, whatever. All these things would be harvested at the same time. And there is a big push into companion planting, because all of these things working together, they helped each other, they were benefiting each other, they were giving back to each other, all for the sake of saving space, right?
Mhm.
And working within the time frame that you had.
So I plant
So
my
for
corn.
Mark's question there, he's kind of wondering.
Oh, best varieties.
Would love to know
See-
the best variety.
Okay, best variety you're looking at for corn, you'd want to just do a nice hardy corn. I mean, in
Like a sweet
Canada,
corn?
Yeah, sweet corn, peaches and cream.
I love peaches and cream.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to, by all means, fill your boots, do some ornamental stuff. You don't
I
have
love
to
that.
sit by and live by the rules of the book. You don't have to
Indian
eat
corn.
the stuff that you plant. Yeah, exactly. The gems, those little gem
Yeah,
corns.
yeah.
You don't have to do anything that they say like, oh, well, you have to eat it. No, you don't. You can make jewelry out of it. It doesn't matter, right?
I
And
have
then from
pink
there, you have
popcorning. I have pink popcorn or corn. So
Yes,
it will
yeah.
legitimately, when you pop it, it'll go pink.
exactly. And then you have
Yeah.
your beans, right? Now, beans, it all depends on what's your preference. Are you looking for
Magical
big?
fruit.
Yeah, well, are you looking for chili beans? Are you looking for beans
Wax
that you put in?
beans.
Exactly. So that goes back to whatever you want. For me to tell
Mhm.
you what the best variety for you is to grow in your garden, that would be a bit much for me to do. So it all depends on what you want to grow. Now, obviously, you'd want runner beans, you want climbers, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
But it all goes back to what you want: yellow, green. If you want the broader size beans, or if you want string beans, the world's your oyster at that point. You pick whatever that you feel you need to do. Same with the squashes or the peppos. If you need to grow anything, you want to be pumpkin that you would eat or use as a jack-o'-lantern. Yeah. So
Like
or
pumpkin
say
seeds.
if you even want gourds, right? You don't have to
Yep.
sit there and plant squash. You can plant decorative gourds like Caveman's Club. You can plant these little what do you call it? Like little shepherd hook ones that I can't, the name evades me right now. But nothing says that you have to eat everything that you grow. A lot of these things can be used as decoration,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of these things are it's just practice too. You don't if you're growing something, it should be fun. If you're growing anything and it's a stressful hassle, do you really want to do it?
And that's
Right?
the whole point about
Make it
companion
fun.
planting.
Make it fun for you.
Yeah, and that's the whole point
Mix
of
it up.
companion planting, right?
Yeah.
Is the fact of just letting your garden kind of do on its own, so you don't necessarily need to add the any pesticides, or not sorry pesticides, but like pesticides, or stuff to get rid of the pest, or what's the thing, fertilizer, nutrients. You kind of let it go and do on its own. It's almost like wildflowers, like a big meadow, right, type of concept. Because like when you plant broccoli, like when especially like that's going to be one of your first things that you throw in to your garden to get started. It grows well with tomatoes, lettuce, cabbage, and cucumber, onion, and dill, for example. Well, while you're growing your broccoli, throw in like at least one plant per whatever, just for your broccoli, or however many broccolis you're going to make, so that you can surround your plant with that in the level that it can help, right?
Oh, that's any bit will help, especially if you're doing, especially like companion planting is that it's there for that reason. It's to either eliminate pests, increase the flavor, or increase pollinators.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're always, it's always that relationship where they're either giving something or they're helping with something. If they're going to be fighting each other the whole time, they're not really companions now, are they? So it's, you got to pay attention. And that just goes back to, again, watch your garden.
Yeah.
Your garden will tell you everything you need to know. Because I can tell you right now, if you have squash, they will pretty much take over your garden. They just love to crawl, and they love to eat everything. Okay, so they're not really friends with much of anything other than the big ones that come out of the ground.
And the one
Well-
thing I gotta say with this, the whole like squash, whether it's like especially with pumpkin, because I've tried to grow
Yes.
pumpkin and done the Three Sisters. Once it's put its roots in, like you can designate where your plant's gonna go, but once it's put that main root in, because as it grows like a vein, it puts its roots in every whatever. Once you lift that, it will die off. That is what I found,
Oh, you
because
don't
I've
touch it.
tried to.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is I tried to manipulate it too far along in the game, and I've actually killed my plant off. And then here comes those stupid beetles, and then here comes those the ones that skipping my name.
The borer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I get
The
and then
vine borer.
and then I get the pesty mildew that comes on it too. Like
Yeah.
you honestly put your plant in so much shock. So when you're planning out your garden and you're doing all this stuff, take one thing. Like let's say, for example, what do I got here on here? We'll use cannabis. So you want to grow a cannabis plant. Well,
You seem to
that
be using cannabis a lot here. Are you trying to tell us something?
you guys wanted me to come on and talk about it anyway. So here's a preview.
I mean tomatoes.
Like with cannabis, you can use lavender, chamomile, dill, yarrow, marigold, lemon balm, basil. So what I tend to do is, obviously you want to figure out how big your plant's going to get. you want to, because you don't want to suffocate your cannabis, because that is your main plant, right? So that's your main whatever, but you do want to protect it. And just like Darius said, and just like Brad said, like, if you're not careful, dill will take over your yard, or mint will take over your yard. Chamomile, oh my God, will take over your yard. But like when you grow all these together, I've never had a pest infestation when it came to my medical cannabis or any of my plant. Oh, I shouldn't say any of my plants. I'm going to go with medical cannabis because most of the time I grow is because of that. But I haven't gotten like the aphids. I haven't gotten any other pests or whatever because I always companion plant. And like every year, I always tell my friends, if there's one plant that you can put into the ground with your cannabis, it's got to be marigolds.
Oh, I don't do that with my cannabis. I just plant them in a row.
I've never had to treat my plants for anything. No mold, no mildew, none of that stuff, or any bugs or anything. Like I always wash my cannabis too at the end of the year to make sure that I'm not inhaling anything that I missed. But, and it's so cool that all these plants can do stuff like this. Like
Yep.
like dill helps attract not only ladybugs, which actually will kill the aphids, but like it'll attract praying mantises and wasps and deter no aphid wants to come around that, or cabbage moth, because they're like, what the hell? Or deer. Deer don't. Oh, go ahead.
Deer. That's it. Deer especially. And those are the things too. Like everyone can talk about all the bugs and the mites and things like that. You got to worry about the big ones too, like the rabbits and the deer.
Yeah.
Right. Because those things are just as much of a pest, and they will annihilate your garden overnight. At least
Your local neighbor.
Yeah. Well, if you go out and you see some bugs, you might have at least a day or two to get on top of it. If you go out in the middle of the night and a deer has found your garden, goodbye garden.
Yes. Yeah. Or a pesky neighbor. I mean,
I was just gonna say that the two-legged pests are usually the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True enough.
So the best thing I can suggest on my end or whatever is to just honestly sit down, take your measurements of the plot you want to. I agree with you, Pierre. I really do. And then you can put them in the slow cooker. Hot and pepper. But the best thing you can do is take whatever plot you're going to do and you measure it out. I have 3 individual plots and one really big one in the back. So I like in the back, I tend to line it up with the corn and do the 3 sisters back there because it's a lot easier. Plus, it acts as a privacy fence. But break down what you have. Figure out what your family is going to want to eat. So if you're just someone that wants to. Yeah, if you're a family, let's say like only one person eats broccoli, well, grow 2 things of broccoli because not everybody's gonna eat it. Or if you're just wanting to grow to learn, I honestly suggest you just start with the herbs because every herb kind of has its own little thing, and you'll get the taste of kind of almost what you want when you're getting into like the vegetable area of things, if that makes sense.
Oh, and they smell fantastic.
They do.
Again, they all smell fantastic.
And there's municipal properties, which again we have an episode that lightly touches that too that I've done for you guys.
They just smell fantastic.
They do, they really do. But
no, I was just gonna mention with the Colorado beetle there. That's pretty much the only defense you got against them. I mean, if you don't want to use anything, what would it be like actual like chemical? The only thing you can really do is a pail of soap and water. Knock them all in as best you can. Make sure you look under the leaves. Those little suckers like to hide under the leaves. If you see any little orange eggs, that's going to be rip the whole leaf off and just toss it. Just throw it in the bucket all the same. Once you're done, bring it out to the driveway, dump them out and tap dance. That's the only way it's going to happen.
And I've always heard that sunlight soap is the best.
Well, the only reason why it's sunlight soap is it breaks the surface tension of the water. So once they get knocked in, they fall. They just sink right in. They drown. Now, I like to make sure they're super dead. So once they're out of the water, I bring them over and I step on them because they're literally a pain in my ass.
And then feed them to your
they just won't go away. Once they're there until you get rid of them or they can no longer reproduce. That's sort of the deal.
Yeah.
And hopefully your neighbor, and then if your neighbor brings some home, you got to start all over again.
Yeah. Well, then you just feed them to your chickens when you're done, Corey. That's all.
They don't like it. They have this oil on them. No, there's this oil that they excrete. They don't like them. You'll see it once you knock them in the water. It looks like they're covered in gas.
Wow.
Really?
That's
they got that wavy water thing going on. Yep.
Wow.
That's good. Well, I mean, I just learned
Just
where
a heads up.
I just learned where
Yeah,
shellac
thanks.
comes from. I just learned where shellac comes from, so I'm a little worried to even know where that's going to be used as.
It's the shell of a beetle, and it's fantastic.
Or the shit of the beetle, more or less. But yeah. So I mean, again, just pre-plan, color code shit, get over organized with it. Just have fun with it. If you accidentally, oh, the one thing I gotta suggest though, do not plant your peppers and your tomatoes close together because they will fight for whatever in your garden. And Corey will know this more than I will. Do not mix your peppers together. If you're doing hot peppers,
Oh, sweet
do
shit.
your hot do your hot peppers in one and do your normal peppers in
Yeah.
another because everything will turn hot.
Oh no, it's when you think that you don't have a hot pepper and you rub your eye and you were wrong. You know you're wrong. So, and it's
That
one of
too.
those, yeah.
Stings.
It's what they were supposed to be as sweet. It's not sweet.
That stings just thinking
Yeah,
about that.
So it's labeling is key. Very important.
And the other thing is too is really do your research to make sure that whatever you're planting close to something that it doesn't retain that taste. Because the last thing you want to do is eat something and it tastes like flour, perfume, not a savory taste like you're expecting. Because that does happen.
Yeah, it tastes like gum sometimes.
so
so
caramel tasting broccoli isn't good.
No,
broccoli
I mean-
isn't good.
There is nothing in the world that can make Brussels sprouts taste good.
No,
just throw that out
they're
there.
alien eggs to
Oh,
me. I'll tell you that
man.
right now.
Bacon
Nope.
grease and bacon.
I
Brussels
don't know.
sprouts
That
in-
would make
in,
it worse.
Absolutely.
So
Brussels
anyways,
sprouts and some bacon
I've-
grease. Oh my god, they're so fantastic.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you on garden placement. So I'll use the example of my place. My backyard is probably 85% shade in the summer. I live kind of a bit in the woods and there's trees. My front yard is open until about maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then the shade starts to creep in on the. So, where would be the best place to? I'm really thinking my front yard's kind of probably the only spot, but
Anywhere that gets 6 hours of sun.
Minimum.
That is minimum. That is going to be your spot for the garden. Now that's not saying you can't have a shade garden. I mean, if you're in your back and your back is completely all shaded, those would be a spot for cauliflower, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, things of like lettuce. Too much sun for lettuce will just make it bolt right away. You'll have it for maybe a week and then it's past due. You got to replant it again. Right? It's exaggeration, but it'll happen fast. Okay, if it's in the shade, you'll have a chance to actually get out there, enjoy some butter crunch, right? And after that, it's sort of just replace as needed, but you're going to need the sun. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything. Your tomatoes will just be big green, bushy things of leaves with no fruit. So your sun, the sun is key. You're going to need 6 hours minimum. The more, the better. So if you're saying you get it till 1 o'clock, I would say your front yard is going to be the spot for the garden.
okay. Next dumb question, and Darius
No such
just
thing.
put it in there, but I was gonna ask the same thing. What if it's a wide open field and there's no trees, there's no shade, and it's sun from sunrise to sunset?
They'll love it.
Oh.
That's the whole thing. The more once those plants are hardened off, once they're in the ground and once they're acclimatized to the area that they're in, more sun, the better. Because nothing will compare to mother's milk. Nothing ever.
Unless
Okay.
they're shade wanting plants.
Yeah. But that's the whole other topic of conversation. If you're looking for plants that need sun, if it's 30-degree heat and it's 10 to 12 hours, right? The only thing you're going to have to worry about is making sure those plants don't die of dehydration. You're going to
And
need water.
And some plants also like to be fed or fertilized or even watered at night versus during
Well, that's
the
just
day.
what you should be doing. You should be doing it first thing in the morning or at nighttime. That's just going to eliminate evaporation. It's going to increase, again, deep water growth or deep water penetration, which is deep root growth. If you're watering during the day when it is 30 degrees, right, you're actually going to be doing more damage to your plants because there's a chance that those little droplets of water on your leaves that you leave on the leaves, they can act as a little magnifying glass and they'll burn your plants. Okay. If you spray on the leaves and there's any diseases and things on the leaves during the day, you're going to be spreading them out a little bit better. right? At nighttime when it's dormant, you get under those leaves. You can actually enjoy it because you're not sweating. It's not 30
Yeah.
degrees. You can actually water your plants thoroughly. They will get a nice water, and you're not competing with the sun or the heat or the humidity, all of that stuff. You're just avoiding all that. So either do it first thing in the morning or right when the sun goes down and you feel that break in the air. So plants, yeah, well, you always want to face it to where north to south. Okay. Now the reason for that, if you're planting east to west, if you have a really big plant at the front, so say you're growing your tomatoes at the front and the sun comes up, all of that is being shaded. Okay. But if you're growing north to south, everything, because the sun goes east to west, right? So as it goes over, everything in that row is getting equal amount of sun. If that makes sense. In your mind's eye, just picture that. If you have a row of really tall corn, basically from, first thing in the morning, 6, 7, 8, all of these plants are going to be shaded because of the corn.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it gets over, if you have bigger plants over on the backside, right? If you have tomatoes and all of these plants now are going to be shaded for the last 3-4 hours. So if you go east to west or north to south, everything gets the even amount of sun the entire way across the sky. Now that's just a rule of thumb. Again, if you can't do that, you don't have to worry about it. There's nothing is written in stone. It's just, these are things that people have tried. They know that it works the best, but they also know sometimes you're limited by what you can do. So if you have to plant north to south, do it. If you're going east to west only gives you 3 rows, but going north to south will give you, 2 really long rows, do it. You never know. Actually going north to south might be better. And you just have to readjust your whole garden process to maybe put the lower growing things on the east side and then the taller growing things on the west side, because the morning sun is what's ideal. The plants, I don't know what it is. They thrive on the morning sun. They love it. The afternoon sun, I think they've had enough of it. They're ready for a break. They just want to go to bed, right? So, again, it's all about trial and error. This whole gardening thing is just a big science experiment. And if you treat it as anything other than such, if you treat it as a job or you treat it as, this is going to be for survival, that's fantastic. That's a good way to put in the back of your mind. But at the end of the day, it's all a science experiment because there's so many variables that are involved. To sit there and say there's only one way to do it, that's nonsense.
Yes, Pierre. But yes, you're right, Corey.
You could do that.
It's all a sign.
Well, no. What's funny is if you do have a problem with deer and things like that, your urine it'll smell like a predator's urine, so it will actually keep them at bay
until they get used to you.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh.
So Darius is asking there that he's got a crap ton of snow on his yard, and is there anything
Excellent.
he can do now to help promote the soil nutrient levels as the snow melts?
What the snow is doing, okay? It's the same as when it rains and there's a thunderstorm. Whenever there's a lightning storm, I start laughing with just absolute glee, because that is when you're getting all the nutrients from the air, and the lightning's ripping apart all these atoms, and then the rain's bringing all those good bits back down to earth. That's basically
all
what
the ions.
Exactly. And that's what the snow is doing now. The snow can't freeze to anything it has to have a particle or an imperfect object. So you're looking at dust, sand, whatever the case may be. All of that now is starting to fall back down. If you have a foot of snow on your garden, you have a foot of collected debris that's going to now settle and start sort of percolating down into your soil. It's going to be in micro doses, right? But all of that snow that you have is essentially just a capsule of goodness dropped down to you. And now you just have to wait.
That's why every year when all the leaves on the trees fall around, we rake them right into the back garden and we let the snow hit it and everything else. And then we bug our buddy Brad to go bug his buddy, and we get a till and we mix it all in there and just help the cycle keep going.
Honestly, best thing to do is get a drum and a weed eater, fill up your bucket with any leaves that fall and mulch them up, hit them hard, turn them into little pieces of confetti, and you throw that into any garden bed you have. You're going to hear earthworms cheering your name.
So it's always a good thing.
Another question that just popped up to me, and it sparks some controversy, I think, in some people. What are your thoughts on till versus no-till gardens?
Aha.
I love.
Well,
I personally love both. I personally love both.
yeah. There's oh well. See, this is the weird thing about humans, right? We get stuck in a way of doing something, so we think it's the only way to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about tilling, right? What I like to look at it as the earth has a layer of skin, okay, and we are every time you till, you're basically scraping that layer of skin. You're allowing things in, right, which is bacteria, whatever the case may be. So that makes sense on the scientific standpoint. Now, it makes it harder to deal with, okay, growing your plants and things like that. On a what would it be, a sub level? So it's anyone who just wants to try gardening, till your garden, right? There's no reason to not till your garden, because I get people don't have the time to understand hugelkultur or hill culture or slow release fertilizers or mounding. All of these things that take time, they take space. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you do want to do a no-till, that's a fantastic way to go about it. It's a little bit of a process to get there, but that's why tilling is, it's still king. It's still king because it's so simple, right? I can just have a shovel, dig a hole, plant a seed, walk away. What's the problem with that? It's easy. And I can do that over and over and over again. If I have 50 seeds, I dig 50 holes. Or I just till it. I till a line, and I have that, and then I just weed everything else in between.
Didn't you do the no-till? Or you're experimenting with something?
I
like
have
that?
a no-till garden just because I am letting my grass slowly decompose. I have a woven fabric, which I use as a weed suppressor. And again, this was perfect example where you're saying till or no till, right? I was under the impression that you can only till. You're making a garden. You have to break soil, right?
Mm-hmm.
The plants grow in soil. You got to break soil. No, that's where I was stuck in the old ways. I went and I started reading on just some books about weed suppression, and in my mind, I was starting to think, well, if I just cover the lawn, all these roots and all the grass and everything that's in between are going to break down. They're going to create organic matter, which is basically just a fertilizer for my soil.
Yeah.
So I do a no-till garden by woven fabric. It's not the ideal sense of where it's just a hill and then you sort of just plant stuff in the hill and you let it go. This is like a woven fabric where you drill holes, you plant your seed or your seedlings, and they grow unabated. All the rain that you collect isn't wasted on weeds. It's literally going to the soil to either break down, feed my microbes, or feed my plant. Okay. And this is one of those things where I tell people I personally have no time to weed. Weeding a garden sucks. People say it's therapeutic and, it's nice to be outside. No,
Bullshit.
It's not. It's nice to be outside, but I have other things I want to do than pull weeds from around my tomatoes.
Yeah.
So this was a
Agreed.
giant time saver for me. And I started with just one roll of woven fabric, and it was about a 30 by 30. I'm now up to about a 75 by 75 garden.
Damn.
Okay. I can plant 1,500 plants in my garden, and I don't spend a day weeding, not one.
So where can you get this fabric? It seems everybody talks about Home Depot. I don't know why.
There's Home Depot. There's if you look and you time it right, Amazon can be your friend, because you can get it on a good deal there. And that's one of those things too, where you try to plan ahead. I mean, you try not to give the conglomerate as much money as you would. But at the end of the day, it's the product that's the cheapest, and they're going to get my money because I don't like to spend money.
What's this product called?
Oh, dear Lord. I just know it's called woven fabric. It's like landscape fabric. Okay.
Geotex.
But it's got to be woven. It can't be that geotextile stuff that'll fray
breathe.
off, and it has to be able to allow the rain to percolate down.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things, because people have asked me, should I get the fabric or the woven fabric? The fabric is great for holding stuff back in ditches. That's it. Okay.
Yeah. So
You want the weed
woven
suppressor
fabric.
is the woven fabric. Yes. And there's I found a process that went with it. It worked really well for me, where you basically just burn a hole basically a foot apart, which is, I guess it lends into square foot planting.
Mhm.
Okay, square foot gardening. So I basically put a hole every foot. So now I can plant anything I want. There's no limitations to what I can't plant because everything needs at least 1 square foot.
Hmm.
So this is good for the companion planting too with the 3 sisters.
Oh yes, there was what I did last year was I had 2 rows of my tomatoes, and in the middle of those rows was a complete row of basil. So I had 50 tomato plants and 50 basil plants, and they were just lined perfectly. Pollinators loved them. The bees were all up in the basil, and then they'd be going to the tomatoes. After that, there was the squash. So the squash was running around, doing what they had to do, being completely unabated by everything else. It is a perfect setup, and it's one of those things that people should look into, especially if you hate weeding. I hate weeding. So do I.
Yeah, no, it's they're good processes to do, and even you can honestly walk in your backyard and just sprinkle seeds if you wanted to. Like in all honesty, they will grow. If you ever sit there and watch a bird feeder and the bird's picking at it, next thing you know, you're seeing little like sunflowers grow and stuff. That's right there, the no-till growing at like the simplest form.
In the lamest of terms, absolutely. And that's probably how they figured it out. I mean, they just
Most
watch
likely.
nature and they realize that a bear shit or a bird came by, he picked up a blueberry, shit out a blueberry, and then a blueberry started to grow. Well, I'm going to try and do that, less that stage, and I'm just going to grab it and plant it.
Exactly. And it's good. Like, yeah. And then, to organize your seeds and stuff like that too, you can go get yourself like a photo book that have the inserts for the photos. Sorry, I just muted myself when I was trying to put the camera on. But like the old, what is it, 5x7s? You can slide your seed packets in there. There's also Michael sells like organizers. You can just collect it, so when your seeds start. You can even organize it in those organizers or per photo book. Like, okay, this is the ones I start, and within this, when I do my broccoli, you can even put your companion plants in that. So every year when you go to grow your broccoli, that all these other plants go along with it, and then you go to the next one, the next one. So make it so simple that it's almost stupid. Like you don't have to think about it. That it's just no thought.
Mm-hmm.
It goes a long way, not having to think.
Mhm.
And keep in mind that some plants throughout your garden should be rotated, and some of them is recommended to keep growing in the same plots because of whatever they do.
Yeah, that's important as well. Yeah, crop rotation.
Yeah. So. And a few places that I do get my seeds from, actually, I do buy the Mackenzie seeds, but I find that going through such a big corporation like that, it's kind of as I zip away, it's kind of worthless. So I've been actually ordering from the Incredible Seed Company, and where's my other one? Sorry. Salt Spring Seeds have been the two. Oh no, I have another one too for my tobacco seeds. Where did I get this one from? Greta's Organic Gardens, and this one's out of Ottawa actually. So I've been trying to keep my seeds really local and close by and stuff, because I noticed that the ones with the big corporation grows, I find that they don't grow really well, and that they have all the crap in them anyways. So that I just try and keep things local and from all the small little growers, kind of like someone like Corey who knows how to like take their plants and put them into seeds, because you're always going to get the best genetics out of it, especially if we can get the Harlums. The Harlums is like the key.
And that's very tricky though. It's one of those things too, because you have to make sure that the seeds that you grow, right, they could be contaminated, not in the sense of not being good, but they won't be pure, right?
Yeah.
So if I have 2 types of beefsteak tomatoes, they could actually just sort of mutate, and you won't have the same plant next year. You'll have the same basic tomato, but they won't be the exact same replica or clone of the plant that once was. Okay, now if you can get those things and you can isolate them into like a little chamber where there's no variables or whatever, and you might have to self-pollinate, but then for that, you're guaranteeing yourself perfect genetics of that plant. The seeds that you save will be the exact clone, the exact replica, the exact same as the plant that you just grew. That being said, be careful with peppers. Same idea. If you grow sweet peppers next to hot peppers, The hot peppers could potentially turn your sweet peppers hot next year.
Hmm.
Okay.
Because of what it leaves by the soil.
Yeah. So if I'm growing a bell pepper next to a jalapeno or a cayenne, and a bee lands on the cayenne, then goes to pollinate my bell, that bell will be fine this year. But if I save the seeds from that bell and I plant them next year, I'm going to have a spicy bell. Potentially.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's always that chance for crossbreeding.
For
and
next
it just-
generation.
Exactly. So finding a way to get pure seed, and that's why it's very important to spread your seeds out and know what you're planting, right? Because it's almost impossible in this day and age now for anyone to, especially if you're in the city, to plant something. And if your neighbor's planting something, well, you're foobarred, right? You're pretty much up the creek before it even starts, because you can't tell them, oh, don't plant any spicy peppers. I don't like spicy food. That's not going to go over well with anybody ever.
And you,
No.
and you could do it yourself too. Like you could legitimately be caring for your hot peppers and go to care for your sweet, and now you've personally transferred
Yep.
it from one to the other. So you got to be really careful with that, and that goes for a lot of other plants too. And yeah, Jeff, I'll bring it back to
Well,
cannabis. Same thing. If you touch your male plant and go to your female, now you got a hermaphrodite. Now your medicine is kind of garbage. So
Mhm.
Well, and just a rule of
Alrighty.
thumb to just some people. Last thing, real quick, just remember, folks. Sometimes it's easier to buy seeds. Okay,
mhm.
carrots are a big one for that. The amount of time it takes to actually make sure your carrots will go to seed and will not be poisonous. It's just by the carrot
That I
seed.
didn't know. So me
Well, if
cutting the
there's
top off and me letting it sprout to seed.
if there is any Queen Anne's lace anywhere around, you shouldn't do that.
Good to know. Okay.
And that's why it's just easier. I mean, you can absolutely. People they've chanced it, but just the chance that, right, it's going to create the seeds to be a little more not ripe, hardy, poisonous, not good. That's not
Ooh,
good.
okay.
Again, that
And
goes
yet-
back to cross contamination, right? It's just one of those
Yeah.
things.
And yes, Pierre, and you can post it on your OnlyFans page too.
Well, I guess we're an hour and a half in. So, and I mean, it's been a good hour and a half. Lots
Oh,
of
hell
good
yeah.
information there. So, do we want to move on to the podcast challenge?
We might as well. We can always do a part 2.
Yep.
We got time.
So, your podcast challenge for this week is start collecting the seeds that you want to grow and plan out your garden.
Hey, excellent choices.
Color code.
No, and
We don't
that's-
really have anything for upcoming events that I'm aware of. If anybody's got anything they know, speak up quick.
No, my wedding in
Um,
March.
Yeah.
Sorry, overexcited. Continue.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
come on.
just a bit of info on the weather blurb. I'll keep it short. Winter's finally arrived in most of Canada. The polar vortex that I talked about the last podcast is expected to intensify over the next week. It could bring very cold temperatures across most of the country. Modeling or model guidance is hinting that on Friday night, I think you mentioned that earlier, Melissa, the 4th of February, a lot of places, including the Golden Horseshoe, Toronto, and that, can expect temperatures to hit around -20 without the wind chill. So that could be the coldest nighttime low since the winter of 2014, 2015. So make sure you've got your woolies out.
Don't start your garden.
Yeah. Deal of the week, Brad.
I was actually at a Home Hardware this week for work, and I was talking with the owner. They have a good deal going on a tri-fuel Furman generator with natural gas, regular gas, or propane. They've got it on right now for, oh my God, and I just screwed that up.
Everyone's watching.
$12.99.97 down from $14.99. It's a pretty good solid name generator. 3 different types of fuel for it. The manager that I was talking to said he has sold 5 or 6 of them over the last 2 years to some pretty good people, and they have all come back with good reviews.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've got a ferment or dual fuel is my my secondary generator. So
They've got one there as well that's a dual fuel, and I'm looking at it pretty hard to go get that.
Yep. So shout outs. I'll do a shout out to Corey and the Pierre, not Pierre, for coming on and putting their wealth and their knowledge to us for planting and stuff like that. I think we're going to have a part 2 on this for sure at some point. Anybody else has any shout outs they want to put out there?
Oh, I want to shout out to Pierre for, that whole beard loss thing. I love you and I'm sorry. You still look good.
Yes.
Okay, we have no email or iTunes reviews that anybody's popped in. So saying that, I am going to bring episode 193 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please help us out. Submit a review. It helps other people find us.
And we record these shows live on Facebook and YouTube. If you want an early peek at the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast, and click the notifications tab. It'll give you an alert when we're going live. You can contact me if you want to at batbradcpp@gmail.com.
If you want to get a hold of me, you can reach me obviously at anything with Off the Wall, whether it's the Tickety Talk or our Gmail at offthewall customizing@gmail.com. Personally, you can find me under Melissa Outlay under all social medias if you really want to get a hold of personally me.
All right, take a gander. CC Squared, Back to Basics Gardening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you in the gardens. Keep it real.
All right. If anybody wants to reach me, you can send to feedback@prepperpodcast.ca or post something up on the Discord. I'm frequently there. If you want to reach Eric, you could check him out or reach out to him at Rapid Survival at rapidsurvival.com. Catch him on the live chat if he's not taking care of the family. He can also be reached at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. So thanks for joining us. Until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.